Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play ActRaiser. In the last part, we went through Eidos and got it through its max population after saving it from a volcano, and now it's time for the next area, Marahna. And is it just me or did something on the map there look a little bit familiar? Either way, before we take care of the actual land, we need to go take care of some monsters, as usual. Marahna is our generic swamp level, though thankfully the water actually doesn't have a current that pushes you back. You're completely free to move forward through it. However, they do like to hide enemies in it from time to time. It only does that like 2 or 3 times, but it will blindside you if you're just rushing ahead. I will guarantee you that. Okay, maybe more than 2 or 3. They also like to blindside you a bit more with enemies that fall from the sky like that with those particular red totem poles. There's also blue ones, but they don't jump around at all. They just shoot stuff at you. However, off the top of my head, I think this also might be the shortest Act 1 stage, aside from maybe Fillmore Act 1. Mind you, in general, of course, the Act 1 stages are shorter than the Act 2, because you can technically do any of the Act 2s past a certain, Act 1s past a certain point in any order. But even by comparison, this feels short, because I think it's just 2 screens in the boss fight. Well, 2 areas than the boss fight, rather, because technically speaking, this area is more than 1 screen long. Now, something I actually figured out in between parts was I actually figured out some of the regional differences between the Japanese, American, European versions of this game, so I'll go more over that in a moment. However, one thing I should mention, because of course we're in the stage, if you're going for the max population, this is the area you're going to want to grind in, because the extra life is in this area. Albeit, it can be a bit of a precise jump to make. This is where you're going to want to do it. In terms of the score you need for max population on this area, between the 2 acts at least, you want 16,300, I believe. That is the lowest score for a reason, because Marahna is overall the smallest area in the game. That jump there that I just did is actually the precise one, because if you jump too late or too early, you're either going to fall into that hole right there anyway, or the red totem pole is going to knock you back. You want to land on the first tile of the platform above me to get that one up easily. And now I'm stuck down here, by the way. This is actually where I'm going to be doing the grinding I can on the 1 life. Although this does take, I think, 2 or 3 lives to do, because there's also just not too many enemies to do this to. Also, I always get stupidly hit by that enemy, but the way you're supposed to take care of them is to jump after, I think, 1 slash, just so you can avoid their little stab attack. Now, I brought in Magical Stardust for this level as well. In a way, that's not the most recommendable thing, but it's the only other spell we have right now that's not Magical Fire anyway, because the boss of this level is, let's say, not the most weak to Magical Stardust. Also, I only went for 13,000 again, because my extra lives will cover the rest of it. The boss for this stage is this giant plant wall. It fires up projectiles like that eventually start sprouting out vines in 2 of the cardinal directions, either completely horizontal or completely vertical, and I think they alternate at that too. And that's about it for the attacks it has. The other main thing it does is that it has this vine that's constantly following you around, trying to stab you, rather. However, if you're careful with how you position yourself, you can just jump right over it like that, come over here, do some easy slices, and then say, like, use Magical Stardust to get some potential damage in. It's better than most of my Magical Stardusts against this thing are. But that's Act 1. Honestly, it's probably the easiest Act 1 since Fillmore. Because there's no threat of instant death compared to Bloodpool, Cassandora, and Eidos, so yeah. Huh. The Act 1s are a bit sporadic like that, I do admit, just because you can tackle them in any order, so there's no real difficulty curve. Well, there's some order, but you know what I mean. Sir Moyle, Marahna may become a land where people can live in peace. Alright, my master, let us work towards peace. And they already have something for us, as usual. Home master, although a beautiful island, Marahna is covered with palm trees and it seems so small. Would you destroy some of the palm trees? Palm trees are basically just recolors of the normal trees, you need to zap them. However, first off, I want to do some other stuff before we actually start growing the population around here. You saw me do the wrong thing there, that's just because again, the sim mode is collected separately. Is it just me or does this look the slightest bit familiar? Yeah, Yeah, I remember that design. That looks like the Nazca lines here in Cassandora. Oh yeah, by the way, people here are still dying. Oh well. And notice how there's a rock on the Nazca lines right there. Let's head back to Marahna now and see what happens if we try to do something in that specific spot with lightning. And it looks like we destroyed a tree. That is actually very important. And I'm doing things in a fairly specific order here because here's the thing. As an overall sim area, Marahna is the absolute easiest. There is complete room for error. There's very little way you can screw up this place. Except for the way some of the scripting works sometimes. Because say if I had done that a bit later, it would have caused one of the cutscenes in the plot to not play. In fact, I think I actually miss a cutscene from the plot here just because of the way that order that things play out in. Part of it might also just be the fact that I shouldn't be destroying this many of the things so early, but oh well. I am taking care of more or less every forest right now, at least, so I can focus on the marshlands later. And now, before we actually start growing the population, there's one more thing we want to do. We want to use an earthquake. Sir Moyle, look, something strange is about to happen near the northwestern shore. This is the one area where earthquake actually changes the landscape. How wonderful, the two islands are now connected. And you need to do that in order to reach that northwestern monster lair. With that said, now it's finally time for us to start growing the population, the land. This was just so I could streamline the path as much as possible, though again, I think the way I ordered things made me miss one cutscene. I'll see if I can find the script for that in a moment or two. In terms of the max population for Marahna, this place starts with a max of 210, but with the score we got earlier, its max population is boosted to 538, the absolute smallest in the game. Also, I need to use some wheat here because given the small space here, it's still very important that we use wheat just so we can have as many spaces as possible reserved for housing. Though even on the whole, I think that won't matter in the long run because the structure limit is not a problem in the game from here on out. Because every area, more or less, I think at this point, will have less than 100 structures. Oh, Master, a temple has suddenly appeared in Marahna. People are saying they built it to worship you, but I sense something is wrong. The temple is the only building the monsters have not tried to destroy. That makes me very uneasy. I hope nothing happens. This is what I mean by the chain of events being very easy to screw up. If, say, I had dropped a certain item right then and there, I actually would have skipped that cutscene and the temple would actually never physically appear, even though the progress would be made. And in case you're wondering where the temple is, it's right there. So if I had, say, dropped the ancient tablet we got in Cassandora here, because obviously it's related to the island, I would not have had that temple appear. And because of that, I actually had to record this area maybe 5 times before I got most of the events to happen. I still think there's one I missed, but oh well. The most I can recommend about a pathway to take here is to go for the northwest first, and then head towards the east and the southwest. Just because you get to take care of 2 monster layers in quick succession, that means you'll advance your civilization level, which makes level ups more likely that much more quickly. This used to be my favorite area at one point, but not anymore. Many of our people have already turned against our Eternal Master. I believe the shrine may be the cause of this change of heart. This is a problem we must solve on our own. I just thought you should know. I swear I've had playthroughs where that cutscene has never happened at all. Which, mind you, if this is the one area where that happens in with consistency, that's pretty good for a game like this early in the Super Nintendo's life cycle. But it's still kind of annoying. Oh, no, you don't. Notable, since this is actually the only area I think it can happen in, if a napper bat tries to kidnap some of your citizens, and you take it down over the ocean, like I think I'm about to, they die. And the house gets destroyed too, weirdly enough, but I don't know why, but I find that really funny. I shouldn't, people just drown, but the suddenness of it just always kind of threw me off. Also, even though it hasn't been happening that much, I should put a disclaimer for this video in particular. If you hear rumbling in the background, that's because there's a light storm going on outside, and I'm not sure if there's actual thunder or if it's just engines I can hear from, like, down my backyard into the hill and such. Not entirely sure about that, but if you hear that, that's what's going on. Alright, now I think it's about time we probably should drop these marshlands just so we can actually see what's going on in these last few areas. I find it kind of odd, though, that these skull enemies aren't here. I always figured that maybe the intended route was for you to go to Marahna, then Aitos. But basically, everything, including the game itself, seems to say that Aitos is the area before Marahna. I think the level you need for Marahna is higher, and I think even some of the in-game stuff puts Aitos before it, like the population menu, for instance. Oh, Master, because of the many plagues here in Marahna, we should never be without medical herbs. May we present this herb as an offering to you this year. If any other lands suffer from the plagues as we do, please offer this herb to them. Didn't some place need herbs to not die? My master, this is a medical herb. Anyone who drinks the tea of this herb will immediately be cured of any plague. Yeah, I guess someplace did need that. We'll take it over there eventually. I say eventually because I took it there earlier, one of my test playthroughs, and it caused one of the cutscenes to not happen in the right order. Oh, and someone found something again. At this point, again, you really should be using your bombs and Strength of Angels. Although I recommend using the bombs more than the Strength of Angels, because the Strength of Angels will come in handy more in the next area. But it's at the point where you're going to have so many of them that you might as well use some of them just to keep your inventory a bit more full. Now, earlier I was bringing up ideas of how this game was changed for America, and I brought up some of the difficulty stuff earlier, like damage being changed around, some enemy placements, MP costs. But other things include some obvious graphical stuff, like for instance, I think in the Japanese version, all the monster layers were patterned after the Stars of David. Spike pits were almost always instant kill in Japan. They're not always over here. And one of the changes I am more grateful for is that during the action stages, the timers were extended because apparently they were a lot more strict in Japan. But in a weird instance, the sim sections were actually made a bit more difficult in the States. And by that I mean I think the amount of people you need to get level ups was raised. I'm not exactly sure by what amount, but it definitely was. Now the one thing that I haven't mentioned in the game yet, because you only unlock it after beating it, is Professional Mode. Professional Mode is basically this game's hard mode, only it's just the action stages. Your health is maxed out, but the difficulty is more or less in line with the Japanese version. Plus, in the ultimate ouch, there's no magic spells. You can't use Magical Stardust at all. Any item containers that contain scrolls, I think were switched with the bomb items to just nuke the screen. But then there's the changes to the European version, because me talking about that last part made me look this up. The European version uses the North American version as a base. Professional mode is still in it, but it's called Action Mode, and it's available from the start. The story mode it has is basically what we're playing right now. And both it and the action mode rather, have 3 difficulties. Normal and expert settings on that are basically the North American and Japanese version respectively, whereas there's a new beginner version exclusive to PAL, which I hear is very, very easy. Though it is notable that for the action mode, their normal mode is our professional mode, whereas their beginner mode is the North American story mode for that. Although I think some enemy attacks were outright removed. Also, I'm fast-forwarding a bit early because I'm trying to get a specific thing to happen here. If you just use your building and rest on that square there, you can eventually just build a road heading to the north, but it won't always happen, and I can't tell why. But I should note about the PAL version, there's a new expert setting that's harder than anything else the game has ever seen, including increased damage from enemies, and your damage done is reduced. I'm not sure how they would do that in a game where basically you do 1 damage to begin with, but I guess they just have it, which, God, that sounds annoying. Oh, Master, an ancient tablet has fallen from the sky. As instructed by this tablet, we shall investigate the bird-shaped island. Yeah, I know I mentioned earlier, but you might remember we got that tablet in Cassandra by building near the Nazca line thing. By dropping that tablet here, we send people off to investigate the similarly shaped island. And the reason I did the lightning bolt on it first when I first reached Marahna is because if you send them there first, before lightning, using lightning on that specific parts of the island to destroy that one certain tree, they'll go there, come back, say nothing about nothing being found, and then you just have to wait a while. In my eyes, it's better to give myself a reason to lightning that tree first, send them over there, and then get the return when they get back, the reward when they get back. Because as you can see, they're searching right where that tree was. Honestly, though, given how Marahna is, I think I brought it up earlier, but I do find it interesting how this game has two difficulty curves that almost go in opposite directions. The action stages, while yes, you get more HP, do grow in difficulty and complexity as you go through it, therefore having a raising difficulty curve. Whereas the sim sections basically get easier the farther you get in. Mind you, it helps that there's really no way to lose a sim mode stage, unlike certain simulation games, where there is a way to game over and at times even have to start over the simulation stuff you've been doing. And they're back. We'll be seeing a cutscene about that in a moment. Though I actually just reminded myself, speaking of the Star of David censorship earlier, there's a bit more of a religious subtext in this game than you actually would already think in the Japanese story. More on that in a moment. My master, we have discovered the master's magic on the island northeast of here. We present this to you as an offering. Please accept it. Make sure, by the way, in this area, I can't believe I forgot to bring this up earlier, but anytime they have something for you, grab it immediately in this area, at least prior to Act 2. More on that in a moment. But now that I've finally taken care of gotten that item, the new magical aura spell, we'll be seeing that later, let's finally head over to Cassandra and use the herb. With this, the people will no longer be afflicted with the plague. And that's it. You don't even get a cutscene for it. My master, thank you very much for giving us such a beautiful land. Because of this, we can work and be happy. All the plague is there for is in the case you didn't have max population during the first half of Cassandra, curing the plague would allow you to finally grow the population again. Since I'm already at max to begin with, that was basically just a completion thing. At this point, though, I'm getting tired of waiting for myself to actually have this area and grow the path, so I'm just going to take care of the last monster layer so we can move on towards the second action stage and towards me getting max population, because with this, we're obviously going to reach Civ level 3, and therefore I can Earthquake to murder everyone. Sir Moyle, no one seems to be here. Could it be that those two also had their hearts drawn by the evil people? Sir Moyle, you must enter the shrine and fight to save your people. Well, it's a good thing I'm Earthquaking them all, because they have betrayed me. But in terms of some stuff I was talking about earlier with the censorship for the religious subtext in this game, in Japan, your character is outright called God. Obviously, you still name yourself, but instead of being called the Master, you're called God. Whereas the villain that we've heard mentioned like once back in part 1, Tanzra, is referred to either the Dark One or Satan. So, a bit blatant there. Either way, there we are at max population for this area. With that, let's select the magical aura so we can take it out. Your body will be surrounded by balls of light forming an energy shield. And let's head out to our next action stage after we save. Also, I really like magical aura too. In terms of what magical aura does, as the cherub said, you surround yourself with energy, but it's not like an outright energy shield like it makes it sound. More or less, balls of light just kind of hover around you, circling, but you're still standing still. They get farther and farther away from you the more they circle, and just basically become somewhat of a screen nuke, like with Magical Stardust. Stardust is still better against most boss fights just because of its multi-hit potential, but Magical Aura itself is still a very good spell. Also, this is actually one of my favorite stages in the game just because I like the whole tropical castle kind of aesthetic, temple rather. Although in a way, I didn't mention it when we saw it earlier, but the temple graphic on the world map reminds me of that one level I can't remember the name of in Illusion of Gaia. The temple you go to before the Tower of Babel, what the hell was it called? Angkor Wat, that's what it was called. It's very much based off the exact same building. Also, you can just skip a lot of enemies in this section. Though, actually, I forgot to mention it earlier, too. At the spike room we were at earlier, there's actually a split path. You can head to the right or the left, and the pathways aren't exactly identical. The biggest difference is what items you find along the way. Like, I think on one side you find an apple, whereas on the other you find a 1-up. Anyway, going into the other stuff I was talking about earlier, with the whole censorship thing. Another thing that this game kind of does, and it's almost kind of commentary in and of itself, is that more or less every boss fight in the game is based off of some sort of other religion, like Hinduism, Buddhism, so on and so forth. Several other theistic houses are basically used as boss fight in this game. Some Greek mythology, like with the Minotaurs we saw earlier, some Hinduism, some of the others too. And I don't know why, but the fact that we're basically playing a game about a god going Christian monotheism on everyone's asses is kind of funny, but at the same time, I kind of like the plot of Tanjiro and the Master more because it's not as outright blatant. Either way, the boss of this is whatever this is, and the strategy for this guy is that he likes to slam down on you when you're right below him, otherwise he'll slam platforms from the ceiling down onto you, which will do damage on their own, but if you stand on them for too long when you're trying to damage him, you will get raised into spikes, which I think are instant kill in this case. But as you can see, Magical Aura doesn't get the job done as quickly as Magical Stardust, but it still does a pretty good job at it. And that's Marahna all done with. Population's maxed, all the problems are fixed. I don't even think there's actually a population stopping event in here, aside from maybe... No, I don't think there actually is one here. Huh. Cultivating the land of Marahna was a difficult task for us. No matter how many homes we seemed to build, monsters came and destroyed them. In the midst of all of our troubles, a man of eloquence appeared. He assured us that by becoming the monster's followers, trouble and hardship would be eliminated from our lives. Alas, we were deceived by his words. I realized how susceptible human beings are. All of us learned a very important lesson from this experience. We will never betray you again. We can now carry on without your help. Please help other lands to find the peace that we now have in Marahna. One thing I should mention, when they betray you before heading into Act 2, you can no longer take offerings from them, so that's why I recommend grabbing, like, the Magical Aura as soon as possible. However, before we end things off, I do want to do one more thing before we head off to the final area in the game, at least sim mode-wise, and that's grab one more thing of wheat. But with that, I'm going to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and in part 6, we'll be heading off to the final region the landmass has for us. See you guys then.